The jungle of Theta Kairos 4 breathed with humidity and danger as Sergeant Kira Voss moved through the undergrowth with practiced silence. Squad of 6 moved in a standard patrol formation through the dense vegetation that towered overhead. Like cathedral walls of green and violet, the mission was simple reconnaissance after 3 human colonies had gone dark over the past 2 months. Each colony had been found completely destroyed, with signs of systematic hunting rather than simple military strikes. The evidence pointed to the Vrikther, and that made everyone nervous. The Vrikther stood 9 feet tall with natural armor plating that could deflect most small arms' fire. Their claws were legendary across known space for being able to tear through starship hulls given enough time. They were a warrior culture that viewed hunting as the highest form of art, and recently they had decided that humans made interesting. Kira checked her squad's positions through her helmet display and felt satisfied with their spacing. Corporal Martinez moved on point with his rifle sweeping the dense foliage ahead. Private Chun covered their left flank while Jenkins took the right. Specialist Okonkwo handled their communications gear and kept their link to the orbiting ship alive. Private Yuki watched their 6 with the kind of paranoid attention that kept soldiers breathing. Kira herself moved in the center where she could coordinate and respond to threats from any direction. The jungle seemed too quiet, and that bothered her. Where were the sounds of the local fauna that had been so prominent during their initial landing? The silence pressed against her ears like cotton and made her grip her rifle tighter. She was about to call for a halt when the world exploded into violence. The Vrikther hit them from 3 sides simultaneously, with a coordination that spoke of careful planning and patience. Martinez went down first as a massive clawed hand burst from the undergrowth and simply removed his head from his shoulders. Chum managed to get off a burst of fire before a Vrikther warrior crashed into him like a freight train. The sound of his spine snapping was audible even over the chaos of combat. Jenkins tried to fall back while firing, but there were already hunters behind them. He killed one Vrikther with a full magazine to the creature's eye slit before 2 more tore him. Okonkwo fought with his sidearm and managed to wound 1 attacker before Razor Claws opened his throat. Yuki went down fighting hard and took another Vrikther with her using a grenade at point-blank range. Kira fired controlled bursts while backing toward a slope she had noted during their approach. She hit 1 Vrikther in the knee joint where the armor was thinner and dropped it. Another rushed her, and she rolled under its charge while her combat knife opened a long gash across its belly. Not deep enough to kill through that armor, but enough to slow it down. She made it 3 more steps before something hit her from the side like a speeding vehicle. The impact lifted her off her feet and sent her tumbling down the ravine she had been trying to avoid. She hit rocks and roots and felt ribs crack before the ground disappeared entirely. The river at the bottom of the ravine swallowed her with cold indifference. The current was strong and pulled her downstream while she struggled to keep her head above water. Her Amma wanted to drag her down, but she kept kicking and fighting behind. But she could hear the Vrikther victory roars as they examined their kills. The sound faded as the river carried her away from the ambush site. Kira lost track of time in the water. She focused only on breathing and not drowning while the current took her wherever it wanted. Eventually, the river widened and slowed. She managed to grab onto an overhanging root and pull herself onto a muddy bank. For several minutes she just lay there and breathed. Everything hurt, and her head was ringing from impacts she barely remembered when she could move again. She crawled further from the water and did an inventory. Her rifle was gone along with most of her ammunition. Communications pack had been torn away at some point. Her left arm was badly bruised and possibly fractured. At least 3 ribs were cracked from the way it hurt to breathe. Blood ran from a gash on her forehead into her eyes. But she was alive, and that was more than the rest of her squad could say. She checked her remaining gear with shaking hands. Her sidearm was still in its holster, with the magazine showing 10 rounds remaining. Her combat knife was secure in its sheath. A basic medical kit was still attached to her belt, though half the contents had been crushed. Her canteen was intact and still full. The communicator on her wrist was cracked but showed minimal power. Still available, the nearest human outpost was 80 kilometers northeast through jungle, now crawling with Vreekther hunting parties she could try to hide and hope someone came looking for her squad, but the Vreekther would search the area thoroughly, and she was leaving a blood trail that even she could follow, or she could move now while she still had the strength. She could try to make it to the outpost before infection or her injuries stopped her hiding meant slow death. Moving meant she had a chance. Kira forced herself to stand despite the protest of every muscle and bone. She used water from her canteen to clean the head wound as best she could. Field dressing and medical tape held it closed enough to stop the bleeding. She strapped her ribs tight with the last of the medical tape. It would have to be enough. She checked the position of the sun through the canopy and oriented herself northeast 80 kilometers through hostile territory with 10 bullets and a knife. The Vreekther probably thought she had drowned. That gave her a head start, but not much of one. They would find her trail eventually, and when they did, they would come. The Vreekther loved nothing more than a challenging hunt. She took one last look at the river that had saved her life. Then Sergeant Kira Voss started walking behind her. The jungle settled back into its unnatural silence. Ahead of her lay 80 kilometers of hell. But she was human, and humans were very good at refusing to die. The Vreekther had made their first mistake by leaving her alive. She intended to make sure it was also their last. Her boots squashed in the mud as she moved into the jungle. The hunt had begun. But the Vreekther did not yet understand who was hunting whom. Kira Voss was going home, and anything that got in her way was going to learn what human determination really meant. War Alpha Dex Call stood over the bodies of the human soldiers and felt satisfaction course through his blood. The ambush had been executed perfectly. His hunting pack had tracked these scouts for 2 days before choosing the ideal killing ground. The humans had walked into the trap exactly as predicted. 12 Vreekther warriors against 6 human soldiers, and the battle had lasted less than 3 minutes. Thexel examined each body carefully, as was proper after a successful hunt. These humans had fought well for prey animals. One had managed to kill Hunter Dreshka with an explosive device. Another had wounded Korvek badly enough that he would carry scars, but in the end, superior strength and natural armor had prevailed as it always did. His second claw approached and gestured toward the ravine. War Alpha. The small female went into the river during the battle. Her body? Not recovered yet, but the current is strong, and she was injured from my strike. She wore the armor of a leader. Dex Cal moved to the ravine edge and looked down at the rushing water below. A blood trail led to the edge and disappeared. The water would have taken her far downstream, and she was damaged. His second claw agreed. No prey survives the river in this region, even without injuries. Dexcall nodded slowly. Take 3 hunters and search downstream for the body. We should claim the leader's tokens if possible. The hunting pack began their victory rites over the fallen humans, while 3 warriors headed downstream. Dexel watched them go and felt something unusual stirring in his thoughts. Female had been moving toward the ravine with purpose when he struck her, almost as if she had chosen to go into the water rather than stand and die with honor. Strange behavior for prey. 2 days later, the 3 hunters returned without a body. They had found traces of blood on rocks far downstream, but no corpse. Perhaps the local scavengers claimed her, suggested Second Claw. Thek Skull was about to agree when Scout Vreshik called out from the jungle edge. The young hunter stood by the riverbank, holding a piece of torn human fabric. War Alpha, I found something. The hunting pack gathered around as Vreshik pointed out signs in the mud boot prints leading away from the water, a place where someone had knelt and spent time treating wounds based on the blood patterns. Discarded medical wrapping. Thaxical studied the trail with growing interest. Female had survived the river. More than that, she was moving northeast with clear purpose. She heads toward human territory. She must know we will follow, yet she moves anyway. Dexcall felt his blood quicken with anticipation. This was unexpected. Most prey, when separated from their pack, either hid or fled in random panic. This human was wounded and alone, yet she was moving with direction and intent. We will follow, he declared. But War Alpha, our mission was to eliminate the scouting party. That mission is complete. This is personal hunting now. Second Claw hesitated. The female is injured and has limited weapons. She will die in the jungle without our intervention. Dexcall showed his teeth. Then we will ensure she has a proper death, one worthy of a warrior who survived the river. The hunting pack moved out following the trail the human female had left. She was not being particularly careful about concealment, which made tracking simple. Dexcall noted that her stride was steady despite her injury. She was maintaining a consistent pace rather than rushing. Interesting, by midday, they had covered significant ground, but had not yet caught sight of their quarry. Trail led through dense jungle and across a stream where she had stopped to refill her water container. Second Claw pointed out drops of blood on the rocks. She still bleeds. We will catch her before nightfall. But nightfall came without contact. Human had covered more distance than seemed possible for an injured prey animal. Dexcall called a halt to rest his hunters. They would resume at first light when tracking would be easier. During the night, one of his scouts triggered some kind of noise. Trap. The human had constructed a pile of stones balanced to fall when disturbed. The crash woke the entire hunting pack. Dexcall examined the trap with interest. It served no purpose except to alert the human that they were still following. She wanted to know how close they were. That meant she was thinking tactically. At dawn, they found Scout Harishka dead, with a single hole through his eye slit. Human had waited in ambush. After setting her noise trap, she had known they would investigate the sound. She had known which direction they would approach from. She had made an impossible shot with a hand weapon at a distance. Dexcall measured at over 200 body lengths. Then she had disappeared back into the jungle. Second Claw examined the body with visible concern. War Alpha, this prey fights like a predator. No human should be able to make such a shot with their small weapons. Dexcall felt something new stirring in his chest. Not fear exactly, but a kind of recognition. She is a soldier, he said quietly. Not prey at all, but a rival hunter. What do we do? We continue, but now we show proper respect. The hunting pack moved more carefully now. The human female had killed one of their warriors with skill and planning. She was not running blindly. She was fighting a mobile defense while moving toward her goal. Over the next 2 days, the pattern became clear. She would travel during the heat of the day when the Vrigther preferred to rest. She would set traps and ambush positions. She would take shots when she had them. 2 more hunters fell to her tactics, one to a deadfall trap that crushed his leg, another to her blade when he pursued her alone. She was reducing their numbers while maintaining her course northeast. Dexcall found himself studying her methods with growing appreciation. The human used terrain that favored her. Smaller size, she moved through water to hide her scent. She backtracked to create false trails. She was teaching them what it meant to be hunted on the fortnight. Dexcall sat by the fire and spoke to his remaining hunters. This human is unlike any prey we have taken before. She does not panic or surrender. She fights with intelligence and uses our strength against us. Second Claw fed the fire and looked troubled. We have lost 5 hunters to 1 injured human female. The other packs will mock us. Let them, said Dexcall. We are learning something more valuable than easy kills. We are learning what makes humans dangerous. They are not the strongest or fastest, but they refuse to accept defeat. He looked northeast where the human female was making camp somewhere in the darkness. Tomorrow we will catch her. She is leading us somewhere specific, a place she has chosen for the final confrontation. How do you know this? Because that is what I would do. Dexcall checked his weapons and felt Anticipation building. She is teaching us War Alpha. Yes. Agreed Beck's call, and the lesson is that humans are not prey. They are predators who hunt with their minds. Tomorrow we will see if I am worthy of the lesson she is teaching. In the darkness ahead, Kira Voss cleaned her knife and counted her remaining ammunition. 3 rounds left and 80 kilometers had become 20. The mining facility was close now. The Richter were learning, but so was she. Tomorrow would be the final test. She smiled despite the pain. The apex predators had left her with 10 rounds and a knife. They were about to learn their last mistake. The sun rose over Theta Kairos 4 like a hammer of heat and light. Kira Voss had been moving for an hour already, while the Richter hunting pack was just beginning to stir from their night rest. This was the pattern she had established over the past 4 days. Humans were endurance hunters, evolved from ancestors who had chased prey across African savannas until the prey simply collapsed from exhaustion. The Richter were ambush predators, built for short, devastating strikes. They had superior strength and armor, but their bodies burned energy quickly. They needed rest and shade during the hottest parts of the day. Kira had learned this by watching them, and now she exploited it ruthlessly while they sought shelter from the midday heat. She pushed forward through their smaller body mass, meant she could regulate temperature more efficiently. Her training had included forced march through deserts and jungles. Far worse than this pain was just another form of weather, and she had learned long ago to keep walking through storms. Her ribs still screamed with every breath, but she had wrapped them tight enough to keep moving. The head wound had closed into an angry scab that pulled when she blinked. Her left arm was swollen and discolored, but it could still hold a knife. She had stopped counting the smaller cuts and bruises. What mattered was that her legs still worked, and her mind stayed sharp. The Richter would catch up eventually, because they were faster over short distances, but every hour she gained in the heat was another hour closer to the mining facility, another hour that wore them down both physically and mentally. She had studied their psychology from intelligence reports back when this was just another briefing. The Richter viewed hunting as a sacred art. They expected prey to either fight stupidly or flee in panic. They expected to win because they had always won. What they did not expect was prey that studied them, that prey that learned their patterns and turned those patterns into weapons. Kira had killed 5 of them, now using tactics they had never encountered. She had made them afraid, and fear was a weapon sharper than any knife. By noon she reached a stream and stopped to refill her canteen. She took the time to check her bag trail. Even though she knew they were coming 6 Richter remained from the original 12. Still terrible odds, but better than they had been. She had 3 bullets left in her sidearm. Once those were gone, she would have only a knife and her brain. It would have to be enough. The mining facility was now 15 kilometers ahead. According to her cracked communicator, she could reach it by nightfall. If she pushed hard behind her, she heard the distinctive sound of Richter war calls. They had found her trail again and were closing the distance. Time to move. She set a simple trap before leaving the stream, a loop of wire taken from her equipment attached to a bent sapling. Nothing fancy, but it did not need to bait. Richter were frustrated now, and frustration made people careless. An hour later, she heard the snap of the sapling and a roar of pain. One more warrior slowed, if not stopped. She kept walking. The afternoon heat became brutal, but Kira embraced it. This was human weather. This was persistence hunter weather. Her ancestors had evolved walking upright to expose less surface area to the African sun. They had developed the ability to sweat, which no other large predator possessed. They had learned to carry water, and plant-ahead evolution had made humans fragile compared to most predators, but it had also made them relentless. Nothing on Earth could outwalk a human over distance. Nothing could outlast human determination once it was engaged. The Richter were learning this lesson the hard way. She heard them behind her, panting in the heat, heard them argue about whether to continue or rest. The war leader pushed them forward anyway. Could let them chase, let them burn their energy while she conserved hers by late afternoon. She reached a rocky area that she had noted on the initial survey maps. The stones here were sharp and uneven perfect. She picked her way through carefully, while behind her the Vreekther crashed through with their heavy armor bodies. She heard one of them fall and curse in their guttural language. The sharp rocks were cutting their feet because they relied on natural armor rather than boots. Another small advantage, but advantages added up by evening. The mining facility appeared through the jungle. It was an old automated complex, abandoned years ago. When the mineral deposits played out, the buildings were still structurally sound according to the database. More importantly, it was defensible for someone who knew how to use tight spaces. Kira did not head straight for it. Instead, she led the Vreekther on a winding path that took them through the worst terrain she could find. Thorned undergrowth that caught on their armor, steep slopes that favored her lighter weight, a marsh that sucked at their heavy bodies, while she skipped across on exposed roots. Every obstacle wore them down a little more. Every delay gave her more time to prepare. When she finally approached the mining facility, she made sure they saw her enter. She wanted them to know where she was going. She wanted them to choose to follow because this was where she would make her stand. Inside the facility, she moved quickly. Despite exhaustion, she had maybe an hour before they worked up the courage to come in after her. Mining complex was a maze of corridors and chambers. Built around the central processing area, she found the storage room and smiled. Dozens of mining charges still sat in their racks. The detonators were old, but they would work. She began setting traps throughout the facility. A wire here connected to a charge, a pressure plate that rigged to collapse a ceiling site. Lines calculated for her remaining 3 bullets. She created a path through the complex that would funnel them where she wanted. Tight corridors where only one Vreekther could pass at a time. Vertical shafts she could use to move between levels. Choke points where their size became a liability. By the time she finished, the sun was setting. She took position on an elevated gantry overlooking the main entrance. Her sidearm was loaded and ready. Her knife was sharp. Her mind was clear. Despite the exhaustion outside, she heard the Vreekther approaching. They were moving slowly now, cautiously. Had learned to fear her traps. War Alpha, the Xkoi, led them, and she could see him clearly in the fading light. He was massive, even for his species, covered in scars from a lifetime of hunting. Looked up at the mining facility, and she knew he understood. This was her chosen ground. This was where the chase ended. He raised his head and called out in surprisingly good human standard. Human warrior, you have fought well. We offer you honorable death in open combat. Kira considered her response carefully. Then she shot the Vreekther standing next to him. The bullet took the warrior through the throat where the armor was thinnest. He went down choking on his own blood. 2 bullets left. Tax Call looked at his fallen warrior, then back at Kira, showed his teeth in what might have been respect. See, you choose the hard way. Good. We will give you the warrior's death you deserve. He gestured, and his remaining 5 hunters spread out to surround the facility. Kira smiled and faded back into the darkness of the complex. Let them come. She had led them here through 80 kilometers of hell. She had taught them what human endurance meant. Now she would teach them what human stubbornness looked like when cornered. The Vreekther entered the mining facility in a coordinated rush. Kira heard them coming and felt her heart rate slow into combat calm. This was what she had trained for her entire adult life. This was where all the pain and exhaustion paid off. The first charge detonated and brought down a corridor ceiling on 2 hunters. The screams told her at least one was still alive under the rubble. 4 hunters left, plus the war leader moved through the facility like a ghost. Every corner was a potential ambush. Every shadow could hide death. The Vreekther had entered her world, now a world where size was a disadvantage and intelligence was the ultimate weapon in the darkness. Kira Voss prepared to show them exactly what kind of predator humanity really was. The mining facility became a maze of death as darkness settled over Theta Kairos Ifex. Kyle moved through the corridors with his remaining 4 hunters and felt something he had rarely experienced in his long career: uncertainty. The human female had turned this abandoned complex into a killing ground specifically designed to negate every advantage the Vreekther possessed. The corridors were barely wide enough for his warriors to move single file. Their armor scraped against walls and created noise that echoed through the facility. The VI human moved silently somewhere ahead, using her knowledge of the terrain against them. Hunter Kreshva triggered the second trap when he stepped on a pressure plate in what looked like a safe corridor. Ceiling came down in a cascade of metal and stone. Kreshva died instantly. 3 hunters remained plus the Dexcall himself. War Alpha, this is madness. Hissed Second Claw, we should withdraw and burn this place from outside. No, said Dexcal firmly. She has earned the right to face us directly. To do otherwise would shame us. She is killing us one by one. Yes, and that is what makes her worthy. They pressed forward into the deeper sections of the facility. The human had chosen her path carefully. Every turn funneled them toward tighter spaces. Every junction offered multiple routes that had to be checked it with slow, careful work, and every second stretched nerves tighter. Thex heard something move in the darkness ahead, signaled his hunters to stop. Then the human's voice echoed through the corridors. You call yourselves apex predators. Her words were clear despite speaking their language poorly. But you have never been hunted before. You do not know what it means to be prey. Hunter Dorvac roared a challenge and charged toward the voice. Thex called. Tried to call him back, but the young warrior was already gone. There was a brief sound of struggle and silence when they found Torvac. He was dead with the human's blade lodged in his eye socket. She had used the tight corridor to negate his reach. Advantage had struck from above, where he could not bring his claws to bear, had killed him with a single precise thrust. 2 hunters left. Second Claw looked at the body and then at Dexcall. She is using our pride against us, making us come to her where we are weakest. I know, admitted Dexcall, and I am beginning to understand why the humans are dangerous. They moved more carefully. Now the facility opened into a larger chamber filled with old mining equipment. Conveyor belts and sorting mechanisms created a jungle of metal and shadows. Thexel studied the space and knew the human was here somewhere waiting, watching. Come out, human, he called. Face us with honor. Her response came from somewhere in the equipment overhead. Honor is for those who can afford it. I am a soldier doing a job. Shout rang out, and Hunter Vexenal fell with a bullet through his throat. 1 hunter left. Besides Dex Coloni, bullet left by his count. Second Claw looked around wildly, trying to spot the shooter. Where is she? Everywhere, said Dexkull quietly. She has become the facility itself. He raised his voice. Your companions are dead, human. You are injured and nearly out of ammunition. Surrender and I will make your death quick. Her laugh echoed through the chamber. My companions died fighting. I am still here. That makes me the winner. Second Claw spotted movement on a high gantry and charged. Human was already gone. By the time he reached the ladder, she had moved through the vertical spaces with ease while they struggled. Below, Thexel heard Second Claw's roar of frustration then. A grinding mechanical sound. The human had activated some old equipment and a massive ore container swung down from overhead. Second Claw tried to dodge, but the container caught him and slammed him against the wall. His armor cracked under the impact. He fell and did not rise. Now it was just Thexcall and the human female War Alpha and Soldier Predator and Prey, except he was no longer sure who was which. It is just us now. He called out, one-on-one as it should be. No tricks, no traps. Just warrior to warrior. He heard her drop down from the equipment behind him, turned to face Hirsch. Stood perhaps 20 body lengths away. Her sidearm was pointed at his head. She was covered in blood and dirt. Her armor was torn and battered. She swayed slightly from exhaustion, but her eyes were clear and hard as stone. One bullet left. She said, "One chance to end this clean." Dexcal spread his arms wide. "Then take your shot, human. Prove you are the superior hunter." She aimed carefully. He waited for the impact. Instead, she lowered the weapon. "No. You want a warrior's death. You will. Get one." She dropped a sidearm and drew her combat knife. Blade was notched and stained with the blood of his hunters. Dexcal felt something like joy surge through him. "You choose to face me with only a blade? I am twice your size and my claws can tear steel." "I know," she said, "but I am human and we do not surrender. Ever." They circled each other in the center of the chamber. Dexcal had reach and strength. The human had speed and technique. He struck first with a claw swipe that would have disemboweled Hirsch. Was not there when his claws arrived. She had dropped and rolled under his arm. Knife opened a gash across his side, where the armor was thinnest. Not deep, but it burned. He spun and struck again. She blocked with her armored forearm and let his claws skitter off. Her knife found his thigh. Another cut, another lesson in humility. They fought through the chamber. He was stronger, but she was faster. He had armor, but she knew where it was weak. He had trained for glory, but she had trained for survival, and survival was a much harsher teacher. Dexcal began to tirade. Wounds were minor individually, but they added up. The human kept moving, kept cutting, kept teaching. She was showing him what it meant to fight an opponent who refused to accept defeat, who would take any wound if it meant inflicting one in return, who saw pain as just another obstacle to overcome. He caught her once with a backhand blow that sent her flying. She hit the wall hard enough to crack metal. He was certain she was finished. She got up, blood ran from her mouth, and her left arm hung useless. But she picked up her knife with her right hand and came back at him. "Why?" he gasped. "You cannot win. You are broken. I do not need to win," she said. "I just need you to lose." She came at him again. He tried to defend, but she was inside his guard. Her knife found his eye socket, drove deep. Dexcal felt his legs give way. He fell to his knees. The human stepped back, breathing hard. He looked up at her with his remaining eye. "You are the predator," he said in human standard, "not us. We were arrogant to think otherwise." "No," she said. "We are both predators. The difference is that humans learn to hunt smarter instead of stronger." She sat down heavily as he fell forward. "You fought while War Alpha. Thank you for the lesson." Dexcal died with something like a smile on his face. He had learned what he came to learn. Kira sat among the bodies and activated her emergency beacon. The signal was weak, but it would reach orbit eventually. She had won the price. It was pain and blood, but she had survived. She had taken 12 Richter warriors and reduced them to corpses with 10 rounds and a knife. Her squad was avenged. More importantly, the Richter had learned something: humans were not prey, they were survivors who refused to die, and that made them the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. She closed her eyes and waited for rescue. Mining facility was silent, except for her ragged breathing. Outside the jungle of Thea Kairos, 4 settled into night, but Sergeant Kiravas had survived to see another dawn. That was enough. The rescue ship found Kiravas 3 days after her emergency beacon activated. The medical team rushed into the mining facility expecting to find a body. Instead, they found her sitting upright against the wall, maintaining watch over the entrance. Despite fever and infection, she had placed herself where she could see anyone approaching. Her knife was still in her hand. She did not lower it until she confirmed their identity codes. "Sergeant Voss, stand down," said the team leader. "You are secure." "Confirm," she said through cracked lips. "The Richter are neutralized." The medic looked around at the carnage. 12 massive alien bodies lay scattered through the facility, each one killed by traps or bullets or blade work. "Dear God, what happened here?" "I survived," Kira said simply. Then she finally allowed herself to pass out. The medical bay of the rescue ship became her home for the next 2 weeks. She Had 3 cracked ribs, a fractured arm, a severe concussion, countless lacerations and contusions and infection. That nearly killed her before the antibiotics took hold. But she was alive. The intelligence officers came while she was recovering. They wanted to know everything about the Vreek, their hunting pack, their tactics, their weaknesses, their psychology. Kira gave them a full debrief despite exhaustion. They are ambush predators, she explained. Strong and fast over short distances, but they tire quickly. They rely on fear and overwhelming force. They have never fought an opponent who uses endurance and tactics. How did you survive? I outwalked them. The intelligence officer looked confused. You what? Humans are persistence hunters, Kira said patiently. We evolved chasing prey across savannas until it collapsed from exhaustion. The Vreek are built for quick kills. I turned it into a marathon, and marathons are human specialty. You killed 12 of them with a pistol and a knife. I killed them with stubbornness and a refusal to die. The weapons were just tools. The intelligence officers took her report and left shaking their heads. What they did not tell her was that the entire incident had been recorded. Kira's helmet camera had survived in her packet, had captured everything from the ambush to the final confrontation. The footage made its way up the chain of command. Within a week, every human military officer in the sector had seen it. Within a month, it had leaked to civilian networks. Within 3 months, the entire galaxy was watching. Video showed a single human soldier stripped of support and heavy weapons, wounded, and alone against 12 apex predators. It showed her leading them through 80 kilometers of jungle, setting traps, staking shots, using terrain and endurance to even impossible odds. It showed the final battle in the mining facility, the methodical elimination of each hunter, the knife fight with War Alpha Lex collar, refusal to surrender. Even when broken and bleeding, the footage ended with her sitting among the bodies, activating her beacon and maintaining watch until rescue arrived. The reaction across human space was immediate. Kira Voss became a symbol, proof that humans could stand against any threat, evidence that determination and intelligence could overcome physical superiority. Recruitment for the military increased by 40%, but the more interesting reaction came from the Vreek Empire. Their war council received a copy of the footage and watched it in complete silence. For 3 days, they debated. Some called for immediate retaliation. Others demanded answers. How had one injured human defeated an entire hunting pack? How had she turned their strength into weakness? How had she taught them to fear? The council summoned their finest military strategists. The strategists watched the footage frame by frame. They studied every trap, every shot, every tactical decision. Their report was delivered to the War Council after 2 weeks. This human represents what their species has always been. Not the strongest or fastest, not the most armored or best armed, but the most stubborn, the most adaptable, the most unwilling to accept defeat. They evolved as endurance hunters who could outlast any prey. They became dominant on their world, not through strength, but through persistence. They looked at every hostile environment in their solar system and colonized it anyway. They are not predators in the way we understand. They are survivors who have weaponized survival itself. The War Council reviewed the report carefully. Then, they made a decision that shocked the galaxy. They sent a diplomatic envoy to human space. The envoy arrived under flag of truce at the human sector capital. Human military was suspicious, but agreed to meet. The Vreek delegation was led by a council elder named Vrekthor, stood before the human military command and spoke clearly. We have reviewed the incident on Theta Kairos 4. We have studied your soldier Kira Voss and her actions. We acknowledge that we were wrong. The human officers exchanged glances. Wrong about what? Asked the admiral. Wrong about humans being prey. Said Vreek. Wrong about victory being determined by physical strength. Wrong about the nature of superiority. We come not to surrender, but to request understanding. What kind of understanding? We wish to know what creates a soldier like. Kiravos. What kind of species produces warriors who refuse defeat even when broken? What makes humans so dangerous despite their physical limitations? The Admiral considered this, then signaled for Kira to be brought in. She walked into the chamber. Wearing her dress uniform, the medals on her chest included the newly created Valacross, the highest honor the human military could bestow. She stood before the Rekther delegation without fear. Rekther studied her carefully. She was small compared to his species, lightly built, no natural armor or weapons, yet she had killed 12 of their finest hunters. Soldier Voss, he said formally, we honor your victory. We acknowledge you as a superior warrior. Will you tell us what makes humans so formidable? Kira looked at the assembled aliens, at the military brass watching her, at the cameras recording everything. She thought about her fallen squad, about 80 kilometers of jungle, about 10 rounds and a knife. We are not the strongest, she said clearly. We are not the fastest. We are not the most armored, but we are the ones who kept walking when the mammoth ran. We are the ones who looked at fire and said we will master this. We are the ones who saw every hostile environment in our solar system and said challenge accepted. She stepped closer to Rekther. You made the mistake of thinking survival is about physical superiority. For humans, it is about will, about refusing to surrender, about adapting and learning and never accepting defeat. She gestured to the memorial wall showing her fallen squad. You left me with 10 rounds and a knife. You thought that was a death sentence. That was just another Tuesday for a human soldier. Rekther was silent for a long moment, then he bowed his head in respect. We understand now, and we propose a new relationship between our species, not as predator and prey, but as warriors who recognize each other's strength. The raids on human colonies stopped that day. Rekther Empire signed a non-aggression pact with human space. They requested cultural exchanges and joint training exercises. They wanted to learn from the species that had taught them humility. Kira watched the signing ceremony from the medical beige. She was still recovering and would be for months, but she had changed the course of galactic history. One person with determination and a refusal to die. The footage of her fight continued to spread across the galaxy. Other species watched and learned. Humans were not prey. They were not even predators in the traditional sense. They were something more dangerous. They were survivors who had spent millions of years learning how to thrive in impossible conditions. They were the species that looked at extinction and said, not today. They were humanity, and the galaxy was still learning what that really meant. In her hospital bed, Kira Voss smiled. She had avenged her squad. She had survived the impossible. She had taught the apex predators their final lesson, that when you corner a human and leave them with nothing but will and stubbornness, you have not created a victim. You have created something far more dangerous, a human with nothing left to lose, and nothing in the galaxy was more terrifying than that. The Reek War Council prepared their final report on the incident. It was distributed to every member of their empire. The conclusion was simple and clear. Recommendation: avoid conflict with humanity. They are not prey. They are not even predators. They are something far more dangerous. They are survivors who have turned survival into an art form. We hunt for glory and honor. They hunt because they refuse to die. There is no defeating that. The report ended with a single image: Sergeant Kira Voss sitting among 12 dead Rekther warriors, her beacon activated, her knife still in hand, eyes still watching for threats, still refusing to surrender, still human. The galaxy took note, and humanity's reputation grew not as conquerors or warriors, but as the species that simply would not die, no matter what you threw at them, no matter how impossible the odds. They would find a way. They would adapt. They would survive. And if you made them angry enough, they would teach you exactly why Earth's apex predator was not the lion or the bear. It was the stubborn bipedal ape who learned to throw rocks and never stopped learning, never stopped adapting, never stopped refusing to quit. The Vriegther had learned this lesson at the cost of 12 warriors. The rest of the galaxy learned it by watching, and Sergeant Kira Voss became the living symbol of humanity's greatest strength, not firepower or technology, but the absolute refusal to give you